Hey everyone, welcome to the Questioning Behaviour podcast, although specifically you're listening to an office hours episode in which we deviate a bit from behavioral science and our normal interview style and we just talk amongst ourselves, so just Sarah and I, about stuff that's going on in the PhD and stuff that you might want to know and questions that we have been asked by you. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. Sarah, which topic are we discussing today?
So today we're going to be discussing how do we organise our time and work on the PhD. So classically a very unstructured 4 years. You sort of have to figure out what works for you. And if you're an economist, you've got to try and optimise. It's a scarcity problem after all. And there are lots of different ways you can approach organising your time. So I'm interested, Mela, do you have a strategy that you found works for you?
Have I found a single strategy?
Multiple.
My one strategy is hope for the best, prepare for the worst, but I think it's more like a life mantra. That's actually a really good question. So I remember, my strategy for actually, in your case, optimizing, or maybe from a slightly more psychologist perspective, not making things go completely to shit, it's a slightly different strategy. It has actually really, really varied quite a lot per year. Because I think every year in the PhD can be quite different. If I look back at this year specifically, so we are both about to end our third, then I think I've done quite well optimizing my time allocation, having a schedule and whatnot. But I guess it all kind of depends on how many hours you want to work and what you see as the starting point of your day and what you see as the starting point of your weekend. Because for me, those terms are quite flexible. How are you with regards to a strategy? Do you have a single strategy or not?
So with any optimization problem, the solution is going to vary based on what the objective is. So I know this is getting a bit too technical too quickly. But if I think about it, I mean, if I take this past year as an example, like you've done, I don't think I've done very well. If I was optimizing for like productivity in terms of just output, that would contribute to the thesis. I don't think, however, that has been necessarily my priority within the last 3 months. Which is why I have like mixed feelings about it. I feel a lot of guilt for not being as productive. But I guess I've been trying to prioritize other things like quality time with my parents because I'm living at home and haven't lived at home in 4 or 5 years. Years, yeah. And also like my mental health. So just listening to myself a little bit more, being a bit kinder to myself. And in those regards, I think I've done well. I've allocated my time well, but sometimes, life and the PhD, it doesn't quite match up. And I think the past 3 months have been a bit of an example of that. I've struggled a little bit, if I'm honest. But if we are talking in general, I don't necessarily organize my time in terms of, okay, I need to work this many hours every day. I organize my time more in terms of places, if that makes sense. Which is, I think, part of why I've really struggled with the lockdown is because I bounce between home as my base and different places, which tells me what I'm going to be doing with my time, which kind of makes sense, You go to the gym and you work out, you go to the office and you work or teach, and that has really been how I've structured my days. Like, I just need to get the motivation to leave the house, and the rest sort of follows, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good plan. I mean, it's quite clearly working by association. So you associate a place with an activity, and as such, if you are in that place, the activity becomes natural. I think that's really opposite of what I do. So for me, the lockdown is obviously far from ideal, but I'm quite a hermit anyway. So I prefer to work from home if I'm in the UK and not in the Netherlands with my parents as I am now. In the UK, I tend to work from my kitchen. If
Okay.
I'm having a really rough day, I even work from my bed, although that is really not recommended. No, if you listen back to the interview we did with Ali Fenwick, where we talk about, how to properly work from home, what you can do to make life better and easier, working from bed is on the list that makes things worse. So take
Yeah.
this advice with it works for me. It might most definitely not work for you, but I do have a general idea. I feel like I don't work by place, clearly. I
Mm.
kind of I have an Excel sheet, I have a paper diary, and I've got a note-taking app on my phone because I'm obsessive, clearly. And it's on that app that I set my targets for the day, and those are based on the planning that I have in Excel for the week. And that has to take into account the events and other shenanigans that I have in my paper diary.
Right.
Trust me, this system actually does work
Oh,
for
it
me.
sounds good.
Yeah, great. And in that case, I just, if I have my events in my paper diary, that I then tend to move into Excel. So I don't always have an Excel sheet with me because I don't always carry my laptop, but I always have this paper diary is quite small. That works fine.
Mm.
Make sure I move everything into the Excel sheet, see what the week looks like, divvy that up in manageable targets, and then put that in my phone so that when I wake up, it's not good for you, but the first thing I do is look at my phone. Again, I'll admit to many an unhealthy behavior in this podcast, and then just figure out what is actually necessary for the day. So I think another thing that might come as a shocker to some people is that within the first year, the PhD was definitely a full-time job for me. Within the second year, the PhD was a full-time hell for me. And within the third year, the PhD, I don't think is giving me 40 hours of work, if I'm being completely honest. I think
Mhm.
by this stage, it is quite a bit less because of this system. Obviously, if you have a similar system and you set yourself targets and you feel like, you finish every day, 3 to 4 hours early, maybe the targets you're setting yourself are a bit too easy. But then again, I don't think having only, and quote, or we just take this with a bit of salt, like only 5 to 6 hours of work in a day, if you meet your targets, if everything seems fine, if you're on the right track, then that works just fine. I mean, keep in mind, doing the PhD is quite a lot of mental work, and you can't do 8 to 9 hours of actual, like, full blown mental work. I mean, when I work, I don't have any distractions. I don't look at social media. I don't look at email. It is just my work and I. So I have a feeling that what I do in about five, say sometimes 6 hours, is the same as people doing their normal job, say 8 to 9 hours. It's just they've got distractions going on, and I don't. This is another reason why I actually don't leave the house, because I don't like to be in an office where people can just walk in and disrupt my
Yeah.
flow. I don't want my flow to be disrupted. I want to be done in 5 hours.
It sounds so intense. It's just you and your laptop in a dark room, like
Not in a
no
dark
sound,
room.
no light,
Actually,
no
if I'm
people.
going, no sound, no light. So I do actually like to be in light rooms. I like to see daylight. I'm not that much of a hermit. And no, if I'm writing, I don't listen to music. If I'm coding, I can listen to like a dubstep, chill step, something electronic that sounds kind of calming in the background. German techno, even, if you will.
Well, it sounds like you've developed this almost extensive planning system, which seems to work for you, which is fantastic, which
Yeah.
focuses more on task completion rather than time spent on the tasks, which I think is actually relatively close to how I work. I like very much like to make like lists of small achievable things. Makes it feel good to tick them off.
Of
But
course.
it sounds like you spend so much of your time planning. Like, how much of your time do you think you spend a week planning for that week? I'm
Oh,
interested.
not that much at all. It's just in general. I mean, so the Excel sheet is almost always open, and a lot of the things. So I mean, a lot of the events that come in that you have to take into account, like they come through via email, or someone texts you like, "Hey, we're gonna have this meeting then and there, or this event is happening, or this online webinar is happening." Whatever. You just jam it into the Excel sheet. Obviously see if it fits. If you don't have a meeting planned already, and that's pretty fine. So then I think So another fun fact, for me, the work week doesn't start on Monday. For me, the work week starts on Wednesday. This has a very specific reason because it's really, really weird. I have my supervisory meeting on Wednesday. So I know from Wednesday onwards if the work I've been doing that week is all right, if something else needs to be done, if I need to do a complete overhaul. I know from Wednesday onwards what the targets are to get to my next meeting. So my work week starts Wednesday afternoon and it ends that Wednesday morning, just before the supervisory meeting. So that is quite different anyway. So I don't have this big ass chunk of like 5 working days, Monday to Friday. I work Wednesday afternoon, Thursday and Friday. Then I have the weekend, and then I have another 2.5 days until the supervisory meeting hits to then do
That's
it again.
interesting.
So I sometimes take off the Tuesday if, by that stage, there isn't that much work left before the supervisory meeting. And when I say take off, I mean, sometimes I actually spend it doing nothing, but in my case, that's not very likely. So in that case, I spend it doing other things. So I work more on my blog. I move more energy and time towards this podcast. I move more energy or time towards my social media. Like I can always find something to do. It's not that difficult. And the same goes for the Thursday. If I've had like a really, really intense supervisory meeting and I'm just like, currently can't pull this, and I can take some time on the Thursday off. But then again, because this sounds quite relaxed, I do sometimes work weekends. For me, a Sunday isn't really a Sunday. The Saturday I tend to have off, but the Thursday, the Sunday I'm not that bothered about because my week is divvied up so differently.
Yeah.
So it's quite different. So I mean, to me, a working week can take many forms and shapes or forms, whatever, which I think is a very good thing because it's a nice part of the PhD to have something that is so flexible. But then, of course, you get into slightly more dangerous territory where I've known some PhD students who don't really take the weekend as seriously as they should take it. And I don't mean that with regards to, take your Sabbath if you're of religion. But that they just don't take any time off at all. That's, all work all day. And that's, although I'm sure it might in the beginning be very, very productive and you feel like you can get a lot done, it is actually quite exhausting. And
Yeah.
with regards to that, I would really never recommend it. I think you should take your time that you need to rest or to play about as serious or just as serious as your time to work. Because otherwise it doesn't work at all.
No, I'm very passionate about this. I mean, partly because I love not working, so that's what I'm really good at. But having the separation of sort of saying, okay, well, I give myself permission to take time off. Because, I mean, often things that I'll do and then I'll look back on it and think, oh, that was so stupid. Why did I do that? Is I'll really just not be in the mindset to work. Maybe there are other things going on. Maybe life is happening. And so I will not be working, but constantly be feeling guilty about it. So I can't even enjoy the not working. And I'm like, what a waste of my past couple of hours. I could have just been actually taking some relaxing time that was properly relaxing rather than stressing out while not doing work. It just defeats the object. So no, I think, even in your case where you have a sort of a non-traditional work week structure, Wednesday is Monday, you still build in time for yourself to relax, like mandatory time. I guess your Saturday is your mandatory time, and then either you'll take Tuesday or Thursday or half of Tuesday or half of Thursday. So you still, is that what I'm hearing? You're still building in time for, well, actually, it sounds like in those spare pockets of time, you're actually doing other stuff rather than relaxing, but
I can do whatever. So this is the thing. Like, my planning is really, really flexible. And this is, I think, a key benefit, and to some people, a key struggle of the PhD, where it is completely unstructured. So this, for me, when I started out in the first year, we still had courses. So there was quite a structure. And I didn't live on campus, so I didn't live near my work by that stage. So it was quite a commute to actually get in. So if we had courses and I was on campus, I'd go to the office. Now, I've already mentioned, Office and I were not that close. We're like distant acquaintances who don't really like each other, but we've got like similar friend groups, so we can't avoid each other. And something like that. So, if I'd gotten to campus after a absolutely horrendous commute, I would stay on campus like the whole day, because otherwise, what was the point? And that's I've kept up for half a year until I moved, and then I lived on campus, so everything was, I lived closer to my office than ever before, which meant I immediately stopped going to the office,
Yeah.
which was interesting.
Yeah.
So predominantly what you had in the first year was a lot of structure. Like, you knew when you had your courses, you knew you had some deadlines, and in between you did some PhD work. Like, find your topic, structure your chapters, do a literature review, yada yada, and that was all fine. Because a lot of the time planning is being made for you. And then in the second year, all of that dropped away. So suddenly, I no longer had any courses. The deadlines became, well, distant. Like, to submit something in the next 3 years. Okay.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was until it hadn't hit me until then about how unstructured the PhD was. And that then really got to me. So I struggled. I think the first half year of the PhD, the first half of the second year of the PhD, I'm quite, I'm not happy, but I'm ready to admit that it was shit, and I didn't have my planning in order, and I didn't really have a structure. And I'm not saying you need to have a routine, because I don't particularly like routines, but a structure is good. And if your structure is different every day, every week, and that works for you and that makes you feel excited because it's new and there's no rut, fine, do that then. But do have something in place, because otherwise you're gonna sorry, I feel like I'm hitting puberty or something. I've got something in my throat. But you need to have something in place, because otherwise you're gonna sleep in and you're not gonna feel motivated. And then towards the artificial deadline that is a supervisory meeting, you're gonna feel more and more stressed. But also the thing is that if you haven't put in any work, or if you don't feel motivated, that's not gonna reflect very well on your supervisors. Meaning that if you're not motivated, well, why should they be motivated about your project? So. It's kind of like that. So I would 100% recommend to have a planning in place, especially a planning that allows for free time. I do think, Sarah, as you've mentioned, that PhD students suffer a lot from feeling guilty when they don't work because they feel like they should work. I think a planning can help with this, because if it is very clearly states in your planning that you have time to take off, that there is time left that you can just spend on yourself, to put it that way, and that the rest of the planning still works perfectly fine. You're not missing out on anything essential. Your tasks are still planned and accounted for. I feel like that might help. It might bring some peace to mind. At least I make plannings because it brings me a lot of peace of my mind, and it motivates me. I like clarity, which obviously a planning gives me. So yeah, that really works for me. So time management in a PhD, 100%, just plan everything in. Just live by Excel, or, whatever app you want to use. Google Calendar works fine too.
Do you know, I was thinking about this the other day, and actually one of the things that I've found has really helped me manage my time and rethink about my time and what it's used for is teaching. And I would actually recommend that if you are a PhD student that doesn't need to teach, I mean, this is obviously individual. I mean, full disclosure, I really enjoy teaching. So, this helps, right? But to actually opt in to get some teaching experience, because what I found is that when you teach, you have all of these short-term deadlines. So you need to prepare the next class the next week. And you have maybe 5 hours a week. So you have your timetable. You have to work around your timetable. And suddenly, instead of this huge stretch of time of how many hours are in a week that you have to sort of be okay, I need to start this project, but I have all week. Now your time is divided into smaller portions, right? So you have 5 hours between teaching, or you have, a full day where you don't have to teach. And all of a sudden it changes the way you think about the time. It's okay, well, I need to get my work done. So where am I going to fit it in within these little pockets? So that to me has been really helpful, at least in terms of just sort of helping to overcome procrastination a little bit.
No, I can really get that.
Yeah, just, I don't know, the psychology of time. I'm sure there's research on this. It almost sounds like some sort of mental accounting
Mental accounting of time. Yeah, some
Yeah.
time has to go to teaching, the teaching jar, and the other time has to go to, sports, well-being, groceries, who knows. And then whatever's left you can divvy up into actual PhD working jar. I wouldn't be surprised if it is something like that. But no, I really understand what you're saying. I felt the same way with when I was teaching.
Yeah.
Although, ironically, I've told my supervisors that there's no way in hell that I'm going to teach in my last year of the PhD because I just want
Huh.
to. Ironically, I just want to focus on doing the PhD work, which is a joke given how many extra quote unquote hobbies I have on the side, including this lovely podcast. But no, I think you're really really right. But I don't think it needs to be teaching per se. Although I mean, getting teaching experience in a PhD is probably always a good idea if you want to be an academic, obviously, because you're not gonna escape teaching even if you're tenured. Don't make yourself
Sure.
that illusions. But
Sure.
I think there is. I've seen a lot of people within the PhD, but also some MSc students that I have been teaching, and the ones that are like most structured, most well planned, but as a result also most effective, and they really do a lot of hard work. Are the ones that have got a lot going on. So it's not just, I mean, for an MSc student, it's hardly going to be teaching, but some of them still had consultancy gigs, and some of them were doing an RA-ship at the same time that they did the masters. Some of them still had a job obligations towards their country back home. For some of them, that was actually the UK. I've seen this in the PhD as well, that some people take on consultancy projects on the side, either as they've started their company whilst being in the PhD, or because they've already had that background when they came into the PhD. So a lot of people got a lot more going on in their life in the PhD, which is something I think when I rolled into my first year of the PhD was absolutely, that was not something I could have fathomed, that was, you can do
Yeah.
more than just a PhD. Whereas if I'm being really honest now, that is exactly what I'm doing. Now, I'm afraid I don't have a well-paying consultancy gig on the side, but if you want me to consult your life, hit me up. But yeah, I mean, I might as well. No, but I think when I look back into my third year and my second year, I mean, there is a lot of things I do to the side of the PhD, and this I think this tails back into with the fact that the PhD currently for me isn't a 40-hour work week or a 50-hour or a 60-hour or whatever the fuck it should be, because my planning doesn't work that way, and I'm actually quite happy about that. I do think I could put in 40 hours a week. I don't think it would be beneficial. I don't think it would be beneficial in either the long term or the short term, because I think I would hit a burnout or just an extreme level of deeply demotivation,
Yeah.
which is not ideal. This is actually the one thing that you're trying to avoid above all others, except for failing the PhD. That would be
Mm,
unfortunate.
yeah, that would be
Yeah,
unfortunate.
shame, but it's really just. I think having something to do outside just a PhD is always a good thing for your mental
Yeah,
health, for how you structure
agreed.
your time, for your for many aspects of your life. This is a good idea, and it will actually help you plan and structure better. But it's actually so
Yeah.
that actually leads me to ask you the same question: how many hours do you think you work on the PhD?
Oh, how many hours do I work? This is a difficult question because I don't really think about my time in terms of hours spent.
Hmm.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I'm only asking you this because I got
Yeah.
asked this like yesterday over having a nice dinner out. Like, hey Merle, how many hours do you actually work? Because you seem to be working all the time. And I'm like, I feel like I'm giving a misrepresentation of what I do with my life.
Yeah, I would probably do you know what? These are unusual times, so
Oh yeah, for
let's
sure.
let's uh let's take it back to before
Let's
the
move it up to
pandemic.
February. How many
Yeah,
hours did
yeah.
you work per week in February, Sarah? Do you remember?
Oh. Well, let me put it this way. I would probably get to the office at 9:30.
Oh
And
damn. I wouldn't even be
yeah,
awake by 9:30.
yeah, well, yeah, that's with a bit of a lie in, I guess, and cycling in. Um, that and if I can get in by 9, even better. But 9:30 is probably more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say I have well before I tore my ACL, I was doing a lot of sports, so that meant that I would have to have left the office by 6. So, but yeah, I would probably be in the office from 9:30 till 6. It's such a weird question. It seems like such a normal question, like in a job, like a job contract. It's like you work a 40-hour work week. Yeah, or a 60-hour work week.
Yeah, but this is the thing. So, like, just because it says on paper that you work 40 or God knows how many hours a week, that doesn't mean that you work 40 hours a week. And this is something that I feel like a lot of PhD students have ingrained a quite a random number, if you, because it's just 5 times 8,
Yeah.
that they should hit to feel like they are actually doing a job that's worthwhile just for the sake of the fact that it compares to other normal jobs. But
Yeah.
I remember, so I obviously know people who work in, you know, non-academic 9 to 5s, 9 to 6s, whatever. And like the amount of time that they sent me, like funny GIFs or like weird articles during working hours, is
Yeah.
abnormal to the extent where I'm like, you're not working 8 or 9 hours a day. Like, don't lie to me. Like, you're on Reddit. I know you
Yeah.
are.
And I also think it's more about the quality of your work, not the quantity of time,
No, absolutely.
right? So, but it's one of those metrics where we have in our brains, oh God, if I'm not hitting 40 hours of actually sitting down and working, like I'm failing or I'm not doing enough. And I think that's quite damaging. So, I mean, I think that's part of a lot of the work that I've done in the last 3 years is to reevaluate the metrics I use to assess how well I'm doing. So it went from how many hours to, okay, well, am I doing all my tasks, meeting all my goals, to how I'm like actually trying to incorporate how I'm actually doing into that space. And you know, if I'm not having a very good mental health day, not expecting myself to be as productive as if I was having a really good day, or just accepting like the idiosyncrasies of, you know, some days you wake up and everything seems to be aligned and it's all working out and your ideas are really flowing and you get loads of work done and you're just in that mind space, in that little nook in your mind where you're just super productive. And other days it's not like that. Yeah, and there's loads of factors as to why. It's not necessarily a failure of you're not good enough, you know. And I think that's something I've done a lot of work on in the past 3 years. So
good.
Yeah, no, it's but always a challenge.
You know, it's definitely always a challenge. But I'm thinking like, so if you take the time off, you know, if you want to take the time off because you're having a bad day, a bad mental health day, or you know, whatever is driving the fact that you're not having, you know, you're not thriving, which happens all the time, like do actually take the time off, and then don't spend the time that you're taking off to just beat yourself up about the fact that you're not at your A game. What you need is rest. You don't need to punish yourself. First of all, it's a waste of time because you're now spending time not working and not resting, because this time it's just being wasted. So either you take this time off, you write it down in your diary, your Excel sheet, you tattoo it on your forehead, I don't really care, that it's okay to take this time off and you're doing this to be productive in the future. There is value to this time. If you're really a productivity junkie and you can't wrap your head around this, just dub it working towards future productivity. I don't really care what you label it, as long as you take it serious.
Yeah, and then, investing in yourself.
Yeah, self-investment, self-growth, whatever you want to call this, but like, do take it seriously. Don't beat yourself up about it. Like I said, just a waste of time. And I think that the best advice that I can give, although I think that's pretty decent advice to begin with, but
that's good.
No, thanks. I think the other, just when looking into a PhD, there is technically speaking no structure. Is that a good thing? I've not found it to be a great thing. I need to self-impose a structure on it. That's fine. Do that, but figure out which kind of structure works for you. Don't blatantly copy it from someone else. Unless you're like really similar enough and you're just trying whether this works. And don't fall into the trap of having to hit a certain hourly target. Like I've already said, I meet my tasks. Both my supervisors are happy with my levels of productivity. I don't work by hour. Do I have, probably to some people, the weirdest schedule you've ever seen? Probably. I do
Yeah.
start work at like maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. Then I work for 3 hours. I go for a run. I take a shower. I eat. That knocks 2 hours straight out of my day. I go back to work. I probably have dinner. And then by 8 o'clock in the evening, I might still have work related calls with people who are in a completely different time zone. I've had multiple days like that. To some people, that probably sounds like a nightmare. To me, that's perfectly normal, especially, and this is the thing, especially during lockdown, because I've got nowhere else to be at 8 o'clock in the evening, do I?
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. Yeah, and I think I echo everything that you've just said. I mean, take advantage of the fact that there is no structure to the PhD to find a structure that works for you. I mean, it's a very unique situation where you're not having people telling you where you need to be and what you need to be working on at any specific time. Yes, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but if you can think of it as a positive, do a bit of experimenting. Figure out, okay, I'm going to try this for this week. And check in with yourself. And what works for someone doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So, go easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Listen to yourself. And life exists outside of the PhD. Sometimes the PhD can't be the priority, and that is okay. That is okay.
Very nicely put. I think on that high note of wisdom, we should end this episode. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was useful to you, educational, or at least entertaining. If you've got any more questions about time management in the PhD, if you're struggling with it yourself, or if you've got some like really, really great tips because you are in the experience or you've had the experience, please do reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, although I have to admit our Twitter is where we are most active, which is just at QB_podcast, but you can find us on Questioning Behaviour podcast as well. Keep in mind, behavior is with a U because we are British. Well, Sarah's British. I'm British by default by this stage.
Yes, adopted.
Yeah, so this is where you can find us. Please do reach out. Please do reach out to us. We love to talk to you, chat a bit about productivity and life as a PhD student, and we hope that you tune in next week. And we hope that you have a great week.